On July 14, we have a new moon happening at 21 degrees in Cancer. In this video, I'm going to talk about the energy of this new moon, who will feel it the most, and then I'll go through the 12 signs. Hi, my name is Christine. I'm Western and evolutionary astrologer and a life coach for women navigating midlife challenges. I work with astrology as a practical tool for self-awareness, emotional growth, making better decisions during one of the biggest transitions time in our life. If you enjoy this type of astrology guidance, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss a future video. And if you like the daily moon guidance, weekly astrology reflections, guided practices, coaching tools, and much more than that, you can join my membership, the Evolving Self membership. The links are in the description box below. So what is a new moon represent? Well, the new moon always marks a new beginning of a new cycle. It's a time of planting the seeds, like setting intentions, new beginning, new chapter, continue to unfold in the next 6 months because the new moon in Cancer will have a full moon in Cancer in about 6 months from now. Now, this is the time at a full moon where it reaches the culmination, where whatever you started today will reach its culmination in the full moon in Cancer early next year. So Cancer is the sign of home, family, emotional security, belonging, memories, the foundation where we build our lives upon. But this new moon isn't simply asking you, what do you want to create, like every single new moon? It's actually asking you what or whether the emotional foundation you're building your future on is actually strong enough to support the life that you want. Because no matter how successful we become, no matter how much we achieve, if we don't have or if you don't feel emotionally safe within yourself, eventually everything will begin to feel unstable. And this new moon is inviting us to rebuild from the inside out. Now, the biggest message of this new moon, it's reminding us, women in midlife, that our emotional needs matter. Our emotional security becomes the foundation of every single decision we make in life. This new moon asks you to become honest about what truly makes you feel secure, not what society says that should make you feel secure, not what your family expects from you, not what worked 10, 20, 30 or more years ago, but what genuinely makes you feel at peace today. For many women in midlife, this answer has changed because the career that once felt meaningful no longer satisfies you. The relationship that you have worked so hard to maintain may now require healthier boundaries. The home that you have built no longer reflects the woman that you have become. So your definition of success might be changing. Your priorities might be changing as well. And that's exactly what this new moon is inviting you to acknowledge, because every new beginning first requires emotional honesty. Why is it happening exactly at 21 degrees in Cancer, and what does that mean? According to the degree theory, the 21 degree carries the energy of Sagittarius and the ninth house. This introduces an interesting layer to the otherwise deeply emotional Cancer new moon, because new moon in Cancer is very emotional. Cancer looks inward, Sagittarius looks outward towards the future. Cancer protects what is familiar. Sagittarius asks us to grow beyond what is familiar, and together they ask a very important question. Can you create emotional security without limiting your own growth? Many people stay where they no longer belong simply because it feels familiar, a familiar relationship, a familiar job, a familiar routine, a familiar whatever makes you feel comfortable as a familiar duty or something, responsibility that you have every day. But familiar does not always mean healthy, because it certainly doesn't always mean you are growing. So the new moon reminds us that real security doesn't come from staying where life feels comfortable or familiar. It comes from trusting yourself enough to build something new. Now, the ruler of this new moon is the moon itself, because when the ruler of Cancer is the moon. And when we analyze a new moon, we always look at its ruler because the ruler tells us how the story is unfolding. The moon represents our emotional world. It represents our instincts, our memories, our habits, our need for safety, our need for comfort, for family, for belonging. The moon reflects the part of us that reacts before we can even have time to think. It shows you what makes you feel secure. It also reveals what we do whenever we no longer feel safe. So some people withdraw when they don't feel safe. Other people, they overly become very responsible. Other people try to control everything around them. Others continue giving to everyone else while quietly neglecting themselves. That sounds familiar, right? So the moon isn't logical. It remembers, it's emotional. It remembers every experience that taught us how to survive. And because this new moon is ruled by the moon itself, this entire lunar cycle becomes deeply personal. It isn't asking what goals you want to accomplish, not for a new beginning that has a plan, a goal. It's asking what emotional patterns have been quietly directing your life. Cancer teaches us that external security can never replace inner security. You can have the career, you can have the house, you can have the retirement plan, you can have the relationship. But all of this, while you're having everything you need, it still feels emotionally unsettled. So if that feels familiar, this new moon is inviting you to build a life that nourishes you internally and externally and makes you feel secured internally and externally. Why this moon is different? Because it's not an ordinary Cancer new moon. Because the moon, the ruler of Cancer, is sitting right beside Mercury retrograde, the energy is telling us that before we move forward, we need to revisit something we have overlooked. Mercury retrograde always slows the mind, slows it down because it wants to revisit something. It wants you to reflect on something. It wants you to see something from a different perspective. It asks us to reflect before reacting, to consider the past before beginning something new. So many people think Mercury retrograde simply creates delays. That's what Mercury retrograde is popular for. Even for people who are not familiar with astrology, they still believe that. Well, the deeper purpose of Mercury retrograde is actually correction, not only delays. It delays because it wants to correct something. It shows us where we have been operating on autopilot, where we have accepted actions or stories that no longer are true, where we have made decisions out from old emotional patterns instead of present reality. And because this is happening in Cancer, those patterns often begins in childhood with family dynamics, through emotional conditioning, or through beliefs about what it means to be needed, to be loved, to be or to feel safe and accepted. This new moon is less about creating something completely new, and it's more about making sure that the foundation you're building your future upon actually belongs to you, not to your past and not to your parents and not to your fears, but to the woman you are becoming today. In a new moon, you have both the sun and the moon together at the same degree, which is 21 degrees in Cancer. And both the sun and the moon are under pressure from three asteroids, Pallas, Aries, and Vesta. They are all in Aries. Now, these are asteroids, so the energy might feel less intense or might not feel that much strong, but it's still present during this new moon, and we need to analyze it as well. So these are challenging aspects because the new moon is making a square to these three asteroids. And even though, it's a square means it's tension, it also creates movement. So without squares, very little changes happen. So we need squares in our life to keep moving, to keep growing, to keep overcoming challenges. So what are the challenges that this square in the new moon is telling us? Well, first of all, the three of them are asking us to confront different parts of ourselves that have quietly shaped our life for many, many years. Let's begin with Vesta. So Vesta represents devotion, commitment, the sacred fire that keeps us dedicated to something over a very long time. And during this new moon, Vesta is asking us one question: what have you been devoted to? Because sometimes our greatest strength slowly becomes our greatest exhaustion. Cancer naturally nurtures, Vesta naturally serves. And together they can create a lifetime of giving. This square is asking you, is your devotion still valid, or has it become an obligation? There is a difference. This new one invites you to keep your fire alive, but without burning yourself, to keep everyone else warm. Now, the new moon is also in square with Aries, in Aries, and this is the second challenge. So Aries represents disruption. Aries appears when something has been ignored for a very long time, when someone's voice have been silenced, whatever the truth has been pushed aside simply to keep the peace. Many people misunderstand Aries. They associate her only with conflict, but conflict isn't her purpose. Truth is. Now, Aries exposes what everyone has been pretending isn't there. And during this new moon, the truth becomes emotional because the new moon is in Cancer. Some feelings you have been avoiding might suddenly show up, demanding your attention, such as resentment, anger, disappointment, even grief, not because you have become suddenly emotionally during this new moon, but because these emotions have been waiting for very long to be acknowledged. And during this new moon, Aries isn't asking for conflict. She's actually asking you to stop creating peace at the expense of yourself. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the truth. Because even if the truth would change something or change everything, you're still telling the truth, and that makes a lot of difference. Now, the last square and challenge that's happening in the new moon with the three asteroids is with Pallas. And this Pallas actually represents wisdom. Pallas is recognition, it's strategy, and the ability to solve problems with intelligence instead of reaction. So Pallas reminds us that experience creates wisdom. The square is asking you to stop guessing yourself what you already know, because deep down you already know if or where is something needs to change. You already know which responsibility needs boundary, which responsibility needs to end, and which dream deserves another chance. Now, Cancer wants emotional security. Pallas reminds you that wisdom is part of that security. There comes a point in life where your own experience becomes your greatest guide. Perhaps in this new moon, perhaps that's the moment now. Now, who will feel this new moon the most? Well, cardinal signs such as Cancer, Aries, Libra, and Capricorn are the most signs that will feel this new moon strongly, especially if anybody has personal planets or angles between 17 and 25 degrees. So these signs will likely experience this new moon very personally. Now, if you have personal planets in these degrees, the new moon may begin a completely new emotional, personal chapter. New moon plants seeds. Sometimes the changes begin quietly, almost unnoticed, but over the next 6 months, you might look back and realize that this was the moment that everything started to shift. Now, let's look at this new moon for each sign. As always, I highly encourage you to listen to your rising sign, but you can also listen to your sun and moon signs for additional guidance. For Aries, this new moon is happening in your fourth house, the house of home, family, emotional foundations, emotional security, living environment. Aries, this new moon is inviting you to look back home, not just physically, but emotionally. Something new is beginning within your family life, your living situation, your relationship with your past. For some of you, this may involve moving, renovating, caring for aging parents, or redefining what home means now for you. Because Mercury is retrograde, old family conversations, memories, unresolved emotional patterns might resurface during this new moon. This isn't happening to pull you backwards. It's happening to you because you finally need to move forward without carrying any old emotional baggage. Vesta is asking you to look at what you have been devoted to for years. Have you become so committed to something? Being the strong one, the independent one, the one who holds everything together, that you have forgotten to care for your own emotional needs? Well, that's a question that Vesta is asking you to revisit during this new moon. Aries, on the other side, is bringing uncomfortable truth to the surface. There might be some frustrations, resentments, family dynamics that no longer can be simply ignored to keep the peace, because something needs to be acknowledged before real healing can begin. Also, Pallas reminds you that you already know what you need to change. Your life experience has given you the wisdom to create healthier boundaries and a different way of relating to the people you love. Now, this new moon is helping you build a home and an emotional foundation that supports the woman you are today, not the version of yourself that learned only to survive for years. For Taurus, this new moon is happening in your third house, the house of communication, learning, mindset, siblings, immediate environment, and neighbors. Taurus, this new moon opens the door to a new way of how you think, how you communicate, how you see the world around you. It may bring new opportunities to learn something, teach something, improve your communication skills, or strengthen your relationship with your siblings or the people in your immediate environment. Because Mercury is retrograde, conversations from the past may return. These might be misunderstandings that need to be cleared up, unfinished discussions that need to be revisited, or old beliefs that you might be questioning during this new moon. You may also start to recognize certain thought patterns that have quietly shaped the decisions you have made throughout your whole life. Vesta asks you to look at your thinking patterns. What thoughts are you devoted to? Have you spent years repeating the same stories about yourself, about others? Have you become so committed to old beliefs, maybe worries, maybe expectations, that they have become your reality and need to be revisited and outdated now? Aries is bringing uncomfortable truth into your awareness. You may suddenly realize or recognize where you have stayed silent, avoided difficult conversations, accepted ideas that no longer reflect who you are today. Speaking your truth may feel uncomfortable, but also becomes the beginning of your freedom, of the new way of communicating. Now, Pallas reminds you that you already have the wisdom to see the bigger picture. Life has taught you over and over again to recognize the patterns that no longer serve you, and now you can choose a different way of thinking and communicating. The new moon is helping you develop a mindset that supports your future instead of repeating your past. Gemini, this new moon is happening in your second house, the house of finances, self-worth, personal resources, and values. Gemini, this new moon begins a new financial and personal chapter for you. You might find yourself thinking differently about money, security, your talents, your values, what truly gives your life value. Some of you may begin a new source of income, or others might simply begin valuing themselves in a different way, completely different than before. Because Mercury, your ruling planet, is retrograde, this is a time to review your finances before making major decisions. Old financial habits, spending patterns, or beliefs about money might come back into focus so that you can improve the way you think about them. Vesta asks you to look at what you have devoted your energy to over the years. Have you been working endlessly without allowing yourself to receive? Have you tied your worth to how much you make or possess or even give to others? Aries may expose where you have settled for less than you deserve. Whether financially or emotionally, this new moon asks you to acknowledge where you have been undervaluing yourself simply because it feels familiar. Now, Pallas reminds you that your experience has taught you valuable lessons about managing your resources. You now have the wisdom to make decisions that create greater stability, not only financially, but emotionally as well. This new moon is helping you to build a stronger relationship with your own values and resources, because lasting security always begins with self-worth. Cancer, this new moon is happening in your first house, the house of identity, the self, the personal beginnings, and how you show up in the world. Cancer, this is your new moon. This is one of your most important personal time of the year. A new chapter is beginning with you. You may not change overnight, but something inside you is ready to grow in a newer version of yourself. The woman standing here today is no longer the same woman who began this journey years ago. Because Mercury is retrograde in your own sign, you are being asked to reflect before moving forward. Because you might revisit old decisions, relationships, identities, emotional experiences that helped shape who you become. This is your opportunity to decide what still belongs in your life and what no longer reflects the person you are becoming. Vesta asks you to imagine or examine the identity that you have remained devoted to for years. Have you continued being who everybody else expected you to be, even after you have grown those roles? Have you spent much energy taking care of others that you have forgotten to ask yourself, what do you really want from life? Now, Eris is bringing an honest reflection or brings honesty to your personal journey. You may no longer be willing to pretend everything is fine when it isn't. So the truth about your needs, your dreams, or your direction you want your life to take becomes much harder to ignore after this new moon. Pallas reminds you that you have earned your wisdom through experience. You don't need someone else to tell you who you are anymore. You already know. Now it's the time to trust yourself. This new moon begins a new chapter of becoming more fully yourself, not who you were, but who you are growing into. Leo, this new moon is happening in your 12th house, the house of healing, of closures, spiritual growth, solitude, endings. Leo, this new moon begins quietly for you, kind of hidden from the views of other people. Something deep is beginning inside of you that no one else can see. This could be a cycle of healing, of reflection, of preparing for the next chapter. Old fears, grief, regrets, emotional burdens might come or might surface during this new moon, asking you to acknowledge them rather than just push them away. Now, because Mercury is retrograde, your inner world becomes especially active. Dreams might become more meaningful, memories may return unexpectedly, answers might come through quiet reflections rather than immediate actions. Vesta asks you to look at what you have quietly sacrificed over the years. Have you been carrying emotional burdens where, they never belonged to you? Or you were never recognized for those burdens? Have thoughts of guilt, responsibility, expectations from others slowly drained you over time? Aries might uncover some emotions that you have buried simply because you want to keep moving forward. What you have avoided emotionally might now ask for your attention, not to overwhelm you, but to finally be released. Now, Pallas reminds you that healing is also wisdom. Everything you have lived through has prepared you for this moment of understanding. You don't have to repeat old emotional cycles simply only because they have become familiar. Now, this new moon is helping you to close one chapter with compassion so that the next month you can step into a powerful beginning with a lighter heart. Virgo, this new moon is happening in your 11th house, the house of friendships, community, social networks, long-term goals. Virgo, this new moon begins a new chapter for your future. It asks you to look at the people you surround yourself with, the communities you belong to, the dreams you have been working towards. You may find yourself joining a new group, building new friendships, or realizing that some friendships or communities or even long-term goals have changed as you have grown. Because Mercury, your ruler planet, is a retrograde, this is also a time to reconnect with old friends, visit or revisit goals that once you have abandoned, or consider whether the future you have been working towards still reflects what you really truly want in life. Because sometimes we grow or we outgrow dreams just as we outgrow other people. Vesta asks you to look at what you have been devoted yourself to over the last few years. Have you invested all your energy into helping others achieve their dreams while quietly putting your own dreams aside? Have you remained loyal to friendships or groups that no longer support the woman you are becoming? Aries may expose uncomfortable truth within this friendships or vision of the future. You may realize that you have been holding into or onto certain people simply because they feel familiar or they have been part of your life, even though you have grown in different directions. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into the next chapter. Pallas reminds you that you have gained the wisdom to recognize who truly belongs in your life. You no longer need to seek approval from everyone around you. You know the kind of people and the kind of future that genuinely support your growth. Now, this new moon is helping you to create a future that reflects who you are today, surrounded by people who encourage you to become even more of yourself. Libra, this new moon is happening in your 10th house. It's an angular house, the house of career, public image, achievement, purpose, legacy. So Libra, this new moon begins a new chapter, an important one in your career, public life, the role you are or you want to play in the world, whether you are working, retired, running a business, or volunteering. You are being asked to think about the legacy that you are creating and whether it still reflects your values. Because Mercury is retrograde, you may revisit old career opportunities, unfinished professional projects, or decisions that you have been postponing. This isn't the time to rush into something new without first understanding what the past has been teaching you. Vesta asks you to examine what you have been devoted to in your professional life. Have you spent years proving yourself, carrying responsibilities that were never truly yours, sacrificing your own personal life in order to meet everyone else's expectations of success? Aries brings uncomfortable truth into your career and relationships. You may realize that you have remained silent to avoid conflict, accepted situations that no longer fulfill you, or continued climbing a ladder that no longer leads where you want to go. Pallas reminds you that you have been or you have earned the wisdom to redefine success on your own terms. Experience has taught you what truly matters, and now you can build a professional life that supports both your ambitions and your emotional well-being. Now, this new moon is helping you to create a future where success is measured not only by what you have accomplished, but how aligned you feel with the life you are living. Scorpio, this new moon is happening in your 9th house, the house of higher education, higher learning, travel, belief systems, spiritual growth, new horizons. So Scorpio, this new moon invites you to expand your world. A new chapter may begin through education, traveling, teaching, publishing legal matters, or simply changing the way you see life. Sometimes the greatest journey isn't across the world, it's beyond the limitations of your own beliefs. So Mercury is retrograde, and because it's retrograde, you are being asked to revisit beliefs you have carried for many, many years. You may question ideas that once gave your life direction or rediscover interests you have neglected. The answers you are looking for may already exist within the experiences that you have had, but never fully understood. Now, Vesta asks you to look at the beliefs you have remained devoted to. Have you continued living by rules that no longer reflect who you have become? Have you stayed committed to ideas simply because they have always been familiar to you? Aries may challenge your worldview by exposing truth that are difficult to ignore. Something you have believed for many, many years no longer makes sense, opening the door to a completely different perspective and a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. Pallas reminds you that wisdom doesn't come from collecting more information. It comes from applying everything life has already taught you. You have more insight that you often give yourself credit for. So the new moon is helping you build a future based on truth rather than limitation, opening your life to possibilities you may never have imagined before. Sagittarius, this new moon is happening in your 8th house, the house of transformation, shared resources, investments, intimacy, deeper emotional healing. Sagittarius, this new moon begins one of the deepest emotional cycles of the year for you. It invites you to transform the parts of your life that are shared with others, whether these are finances, investments, inheritances, retirement planning, or your deepest emotional bonds with others. Because Mercury is retrograde, old financial matters or emotional issues might return for review. This might involve conversations about shared resources, unresolved trust issues, decisions that require greater honesty before you move forward. Vesta asks you to look at what you have remained devoted to emotionally. Have you continued carrying responsibilities that belong to someone else? Have you stayed loyal to emotional patterns that no longer supports your healing? Aries bring hidden truth to the surface. It may expose imbalances in financial partnerships or emotional relationships, making it impossible to continue pretending everything is fine when something clearly needs to change. And Pallas reminds you that you have gained the wisdom to make better decisions about who and what deserves your trust and energy and attention. You understand the value of healthy boundaries far more than you did in the past. So this new moon is helping you to release emotional and financial burdens so you can create stronger, healthier foundations for the future. Capricorn, this new moon is happening in your seventh house, the house of partnerships, relationships, marriage, one-on-one connections. Capricorn, this new moon begins a new chapter in your relationships, whether romantic, professional, or personal. You are being asked to create partnerships that are built on honesty, mutual respect, emotional security, because Mercury is retrograde. Old relationships or unfinished conversations may return during this new moon. This doesn't necessarily mean someone is coming back into your life permanently. Instead, you are being given an opportunity to understand relationship patterns that have repeated throughout your whole entire life. Vesta asks you to examine what you have been devoted yourself to within your relationships. Have you spent years caring or carrying more than your share? Have you become so focused on being dependable that you have neglected your own emotional needs in relationships? Aries may expose truth you have been avoiding in order to keep the peace. A relationship might need greater honesty, healthier boundaries, or a different balance between giving and receiving. And Pallas reminds you that your experience has taught you what healthy relationships truly look like. You no longer have to settle for connections that leave you emotionally depleted. Now, this new moon is helping you build relationships that support who you are today rather than who you once believed you have to be in the past. Aquarius, this new moon is happening in your sixth house, the house of health, daily routines, work, service, and well-being. Aquarius, this new moon begins a new chapter in your daily life. It asks you to examine the habits, the routines, the responsibilities that shape your everyday. Small changes might now have a significant impact over the coming months. Because Mercury is retrograde, it's time to review your schedule, your workload, the way you care for your physical and emotional health. You may realize that some routines are no longer supporting the life you are trying to create. Vesta asks you to look at what you have devoted yourself to every day. Have you become so committed to work, responsibilities, or helping others that you have neglected your own well-being and health? Aries may expose the consequences of pushing yourself too hard. Your body, your energy, and your stress levels may be asking for changes that can no longer be postponed. Now, Pallas reminds you that you have learned enough about yourself to know what works and what doesn't. You have the wisdom to create routines that are both productive and sustainable for you. This new moon is helping you build healthier habits that support not only your responsibilities, but the quality of the life you're living. Pisces, this new moon is happening in your fifth house, the house of joy, creativity, romance, children, and self-expression. Pisces, this new moon invites you to reconnect with your parts of yourself that feel alive. A new chapter begins through creativity, romance, hobbies, grandchildren or children, or simply allowing yourself to experience more joy in everyday life. Because Mercury is retrograde, an old creative project, a past romance, a forgotten passion may return to your attention. Something that once brought you happiness may deserve another chance. Vesta asks you to look at what you have devoted yourself to over the years. Have responsibilities replaced joy? Have you become so focused on caring for everybody else that you've forgotten what lights you and what brings you joy? Aries may reveal where you have denied yourself happiness in order to meet other people's expectations. Perhaps you have convinced yourself there simply wasn't enough time for creativity, romance, fun, or the things that nourish your spirit. This new moon asks you to be honest about where you have been sacrificing your own joy to keep life running smoothly. Now, Pallas reminds you that you have gained the wisdom to know what truly brings you meaning and fulfillment and joy into your life. You no longer need permission to make space for creativity, love, laughter, or play. After everything you have experienced, you understand that joy isn't a distraction from life. It's an essential part of living as well. Now, this new moon is helping you to reconnect with your heart, remind you that this new next chapter isn't only about responsibility and purpose, it's also about creating a life that feels joyful and creative and deeply fulfilling for you. Now, as we close this Cancer new moon, remember that every new moon is a beginning, but this one reminds us that not every beginning starts with taking action. Sometimes it begins by becoming honest. Honest about what you are feeling, honest about what you have outgrown, honest about the emotional foundation you're building your next chapter of your life upon. Cancer teaches us that true security doesn't come from holding onto the past. It comes from creating a life that feels emotionally safe, authentic, aligned with who you are today. Now, Mercury Retrograde reminds us that before we rush into the future, we need to understand the stories that we have been carrying from the past. Some of those stories have supported us, and others have quietly limited us. This new moon is giving us the opportunity to decide which ones we want to continue living by. Now, Vesta asks us to examine where we have devoted our time, our energy, our heart. Have those commitments nourished us, or have they slowly become obligations for us? Aries asks us to stop avoiding the truth we have been afraid to face, because sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't just creating conflict, it's actually becoming honest with ourselves. Now, Pallas reminds us that we already possess the wisdom we need in life. Life has been preparing us for this moment through every single experience we have been through, every single challenge, and every single lesson we have lived through. Now, many people in midlife, this new moon isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the woman you have always been, beneath your expectations, responsibilities, and the roles you have carried for many, many years. This is your invitation to build a life that doesn't just look secure from the outside. It also feels secure from the inside. A life where your emotional well-being becomes just as important as your responsibilities. A life where your needs matter. A life that reflects the woman you are becoming, not the woman you once have been. Now, thank you very much for watching and being here. Let me know in the comments, what emotional foundation are you ready to build during this new moon in Cancer? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, take good care of yourself, trust your inner wisdom, and remember, the strongest foundation you will ever build is the one that allows you to feel home and safe within yourself. If this message resonated with you, please consider like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.